Hi, friends. Natasha Denona's new retro glam palette. I was delighted to see the package arrive, but it was customary to expect a PR package arriving well after the product launched online or arrived in store. So that's why I was shocked to see this delivered when it was, and I was going to pick it up, but this is very helpful to receive PR in terms of the budget and providing content that covers new product releases. So today we are going into the swatches. We'll be comparing this to the Glam and Retro Midi, which Natasha had explained that the Retro Glam is a mishmash between those two palettes, going into the original Mini Retro, where originally I think many of us were expecting the Mini Retro to reflect these two shades, but in fact it pulled from the Mauve Rose inspiration, which is why we have the burgundies and rose tones here present in the Retro palette. Now we have Retro Glam, which I think by far one of the most beautiful product designs Natasha has released in her Midi format. You got like this little swirl thing going on that definitely invokes that retro vibe and feel. The desaturated soft pastel shades present here on the top. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's like a double overlay. You actually have that design under another piece of plastic, but you still have the magnetic closure with the lining. And here is the palette. I tried this palette briefly yesterday just to get a feel about it. I would consider that this still be a first impressions phase, but I just wanted to get my hands in there to get an idea, and it's pretty. We got the product card here to go over the details. $69. I believe that is $4 more than the original price. I think usually the Midis have been going for $65. 19.25 grams of product, paraben free, alcohol free, mineral oil free, UV filters free, D5 free, but most importantly, made in Italy. Bringing two of Natasha's most celebrated creations into a new midi-sized eyeshadow palette concept, this dynamic color story combines the greens, pinks, and neutral shades of the Mini Retro eyeshadow palette with a variety of seductive glam eyeshadow palette finishes in a collection of all new shades, ranging from muted sage greens and cool browns to shimmering dusty pinks and sparkling champagne nudes. The Retro Glam eyeshadow palette suits every occasion. Use alone to create mesmerizing multi-dimensional looks or pair with other palettes in the Retro and Glam families for unlimited inspiration. In regards to the Glam palette finishes, a lot of the metallics in here have more of a moderate shine as opposed to the duochrome multi-pearl reflective finishes. So I can see that more of like that moderate metallic formula exists in Retro Glam, but you also have, I think, one or two reflective shades in here. So why don't we go over these swatches now? First, we start with Flare, a sparkling metallic vintage rose with a silver shift. Jazzy, a metallic dark cool brown. Oscar, that's shiny. Metallic light medium vintage champagne. I like that undertone. It leans a little more cool, not too icy, however. That's an interesting shade. It's almost like a taupe champagne. Evergreen. Evergreen's pretty. Matte cream powder, medium dark sage green. Marlin, metallic light medium sage green. So like I said, this is more of like that metallic finish that has nice shine, but there are formulas that are a tier higher within the Natasha Denona formula family where it has more glitz. I think we'll run into that shade in the last row. Maxi, metallic medium dark warm taupe. Sage, matte medium sage green. green. Holly, a matte light neutral rose. Fringe, a matte pastel sage green. Faye, a matte medium muted clay. When applied on the lids, this is the matte I applied yesterday. Because it is a creamy powder formula, it looks more intense on the application and it takes on almost like an olive undertone when blended. Here's a shiny shade. We got Flutter, sparkling light champagne pink. So you see there's a lot more reflectivity in that type of shade. I think the only one in the palette that has that twinkle effect as opposed to, again, the more metallic finishes here that exist in these swatches. Lucy, matte light limestone. Palladian, metallic pastel sage green. This has more of a powdery feel to it. Not quite like the metallics, but not matte either. So I would have to be careful with that shade to ensure that it doesn't look too powdery on the lids. That will have to be determined by what brush I choose to use. Belle, matte medium dusty rose. And lastly, we have Oz, appropriately named, a metallic medium dark muted forest green. So here are all the swatches from Retro Glam. I think you can identify that this is a lot more desaturated pastel, which I kind of love. I'm wearing desaturated pastels in my outfit today. This is the Retro Glam uniform. Right here. Here's Retro Glam side by side, retro, and you can just see the vast difference between this taking on the sage green inspiration found in the original mini retro and this now pulling from more rose burgundy. And to briefly visit mini retro here, because these were the standout shades in industrial and 60s, right? I will now swatch these on the other side. So that has more of like a taupey green, whereas the matte takes on more of like that desaturated, or actually that's more olive. So you see now from Retro Glam, even though it was inspired by these shades, in Retro Glam you just have more of like that sage leaning, but also the taupe feel is present in the palette also. And from Glam Retro, it's more so the finishes that exist here that I feel are present in these metallics. You see that they have nice shine, they're very creamy, which I think is the predominant formula that exists in the midi glam. And we have to quickly put this up against the Pastel palette, a lot more vibrant compared to Retro Glam, as you see here. Retro Glam is a lot more desaturated. It's like not as hardy as what you find in the Pastel palette. For instance, I can quickly swatch Brisk, which is more of like a mint leaning pastel compared to Fringe, which is a pastel sage. So although they're light, they just have a different undertone to them. And generally when I see Pastel palette compared to the Retro Glam Pastel palette, maybe a little more strategy required in terms of how you pair the colors together, but at the same time very easy, because since they're so light, you can do the color blocking method, use many of the mattes as inner corner highlight moments. This, I think you can get nice pastel moments, at the same time beautiful daily looks that don't look or appear washed out because of the presence of the darker, cooler browns here that come in the metallic formula, which is great. We only have one cream to powder in here, and that's in Evergreen. I used this yesterday. Great to have if you want to change the contrast of your look. You still want to use the sage greens, but want to add a little more intensity to the outer corner, but you can keep it more lightweight. You can use all the rose shades exclusively if you didn't want to mix match the sage and rose shades. But I think we covered the swatches, and happy also to have compared this to the new Retro Glam. Interesting that we have two minis emerging from this one mini, and I think that's great because you could go so many ways in terms of the inspiration. I'm happy Natasha went the rose and burgundy route. Although, yes, people were expecting this initially. Happy though she eventually came out with the sages, okay? So with details and swatches out the way, I think it's time for you to come in a little closer. I have the LYS concealer on the lids because for the life of me, I don't know where I put my Linda Hallberg eye primer. It's lost somewhere. I'm sure it's laughing at me because it's like, I'm here, but I can't find it. We'll apply a little bit more. All makeup items that I have on my face currently will be down below in the description box. Hopefully I can remember to actually follow through with that. And if you're new here, hi, yes, I have a number of Natasha Denona videos on my channel. And as I mentioned before, this was sent to me. If you want to see a video from the creator who bought it, thinking that they're gonna have a slightly different opinion because they didn't get it for free and all that stuff. I know how it can get, fam. So choose whatever you want to do. If you still want to hang out with me, I would love for you to, because in the end, I adore talking about eyeshadow palettes, creating different looks. So whether you trust my opinion or not, in the end, I just want this to be helpful to you if you decide to buy it and need a little inspiration for the looks. And my apologies for the light changes this time of day in general. There's a lot of cloud shifting, so you might see moments of like grayness in the video. My apologies in advance. Starting out with Faye, so you can see the undertone when applied on the lids. Because when I did so yesterday, it took on more of an olive feel, although it is said to be, let me get the card here, a muted clay. So you can't see the taupe, but when you pair it with evergreen, that sage tone definitely brings out more of like that slightly greenish hue out from Faye. The brows, fam, I gotta fix them. They were a little unruly. Even just to have this color through the crease, I think lovely. It does lean very cool, right? So depending on how you want the eye look to appear, if you don't want to apply so much of the shade, maybe not go in like I did. But I think a nice setup for the look, however you want to go. Throwing that under the lower lash line, a quarter in to set up this smoky bracket. Now using the Sonia G Fusion Worker, which I think now ideal tools to use with Natasha's creamy matte formula. I mean, the pickup is going to be sublime, so much so that you could just place it right there, okay? So I'm placing evergreen not only on the outer lid, but the inner as well to create those nice brackets. And you see is a soft shade. Soft. It's almost like a blue-green. It's actually quite interesting. I like this color a lot. Happy that it's in the cream to matte formula because there's a little more slick to the texture than what's found in a matte formula, so you can move it around pretty easily. And again, with Sonia's Fusion set, it's like a breeze. All right, now that we have that set up, know you can go in with a little more of Faye if you want the blend to travel higher. Yes, that all really depends on your eye shape, how much of a gradient you want to create, yeah? Taking a smaller brush just to kind of hit the outer edges here with evergreen. Yeah, you don't have to, but doing so is going to open the eye a little bit. It's going to create that haziness, if you will. But if you want to keep that color tighter, maybe just hold evergreen here on the lid and not bring it to the lower lash line. We could do jazzy if we want to ground it a little bit. Yeah, that's more of the dark taupe. We could go in with Oscar, which is a little more silvery taupe. Keeping it in the green family, Marlin, Oz, Palladium. Palladium might be a little too light, I think, for the center. Let's go with Marlin. Taking my finger and pressing that right between evergreen. And that's really nice shine. I think that sage hue marries well with evergreen. And the texture, much like what you find, as Natasha had said, in the Glam palette. The metallics are very creamy. They blend into the skin effortlessly, whether with a finger or a brush. So the tool possibility is wide. I think fantastic if you're one to favor a finger application. Just look how it melted, right? There's no need to like go in with another brush. It's not dry at all. This is a fantastic, fantastic formula. I think I want to do Oscar, however, on the center lower lash line as like a spotlight moment, and perhaps bring more evergreen here on the inner and outer parts of my lower lash line. And of course, definitely going in with Flutter as our inner corner highlight, or we can do Fringe. Fringe is actually quite lovely. This is what I did yesterday. So let me pick up my Fusion blender and then tap Fringe here on the inner part of my eye. That's going to provide lovely highlight. If you want to go a different route, not use your typical, highlighty reflective shade, but also you can still apply Flutter on top. So it's going to have that sparkle, not the same adherence, right? Because you lay down a powder matte, but the powder matte color will still show through from under. And if you want that sparkle still, you could just use a small brush to tap that on top of Fringe, and there you go. In terms of depth, the deepest colors here are Maxi and Jazzy, and those are metallics, right? You can apply them in the same way you can a matte, or if you want to go in with a pencil instead, maybe you have like a dark forest green pencil that you can pair with the sage look. I would go in with Jazzy and just tap this on the outer corner of my lid if you wanted a little more depth. Now, because again, this is a metallic, it's not going to have that same depth and body, but that's why Natasha had mentioned if you wanted to pair this with the Glam palette, you could probably take the deeper shade here and use that to flick out along the lash line if you wanted a little more definition there. How about we go the other route? We could start off with, let's go with the rose, yeah? I'm wiping the brush, going in with Belle. Now for this eye, I think we can assume if you wanted to strictly stick to the rose portion of the shade, you go in with Belle and then flare and you're done. The shade, however, is actually quite nice. It's a soft rose, but it's not super pink because it's like a desaturated rose. It almost has like a little mauviness to it, which I think quite pretty. Lovely all by itself too, if you just wanted to place that on the lid. No additional metallic shades or what have you, but I'm gonna place that here under the lash line and whip a little bit of Holly here on the edges of Belle. I like to build gradients. You don't have to do this. And Belle maybe will appear more if you tapped it on the lid instead of whisking it here on the edges. Let's do flare, but I will take my builder to carve it out since I am placing it on a wider, oh, here goes a light change, a wider portion of my lid than I did with the first eye. I'm gonna tap that in and under. Hello. The sun's mad at me because I said desaturated so many times already. So I was like, well, I'm gonna desaturate your lighting, friend. Why not? Let's go in with Palladian, which is a totally different shade, but really nice on the highlight. And now taking Fringe as our dominant lower lash line shade. And you know what? I want to experiment here. So this is how it can stay, right? Belle, flare, a little bit of Palladian here on the inner corner. Although it has like that cool green undertone to it, I think it pairs well with the roses because it's so light that it doesn't distract from the entire look. Taking a little bit of Jazzy and punching that on the outer part. And I say punch because I want to be careful with how I place this shadow, ensuring that it pretty much remains on the outer part of my lid. Introducing this step if you wanted to smoke it out a little bit more, and also bringing some Jazzy here on the outer part. I have to say, advantageous to rely on a metallic, especially one from Natasha Denona, to use as a smoke out shade because it's so smooth that even if you're overlapping this with other shadows, it doesn't look uneven or it doesn't catch strangely. And I can go in with a little more Bell to now further the gradient and maybe smooth it out. But again, the metallics are so smooth that they work well with the other textures in here. It doesn't look heavy on the lids. It just kind of swims on. See that? It's pretty. All right, first round done. Let's slap on some lashes and I'll be right back. Here is round one with one side heavy on the sage green inspo, and then on the other we invited more of the rose shades and a little bit of the dark brown taupe to create more intensity on the outer lid if you wanted that impact instead of just relying on the rose flare shade, which does have the silver shift. So I feel to remember that when comparing Flare to Marlin. Marlin definitely is more of like that traditional metallic with not a flip, and Flare having the silver flip, so there may be a little more twinkle there, but overall shine similar. I really love the look I created yesterday, and one of those things, although it was just one look, one moment, I felt connected to this palette in terms of the inspiration. I love these softer hues, not so vibrant and light, more so, yes, light, but almost like dusty, and here's the word again, desaturated. There's something so calming about it. I can't really place my finger in terms of the emotion these colors invoke, but I have a thing about retro vintage shades anyway, and this palette just speaks to me. So I'm excited to see what we created on the first round, and now looking forward to getting into maybe of the taupier shades, maybe a little more mix and matching. So with that said, I'm going to take this off and be back here in a minute. Round two, maybe with a more simple approach, taking my worker, but whipping Maxi all over the lid. This won't have the same depth as Jazzy, but if you wanted more one and done looks, you can definitely rely on Flare, Maxi, even Oz. Oz is one of the deeper sage metallic shades in here, and you can just place that on the lid like I am now. I'm tapping it on the lid first to have the majority of the color there, and what we can do now is take Lucy, this matte, to soften the edges. What I adore about Natasha's metallic formula is its versatility in having great times with either brush or finger application, but mostly for it to blend as softly as it does on the skin without leaving behind uneven streaks. It kind of just, it has this fluidity, which I feel great for beginners to use and even professionals. It makes eyeshadow application pretty easy. So just whipping Lucy on the edges, and look how beautiful that gradient is. That's it, that's all you need. Now with Maxi here on the lower lash line, a little big for what I want, but you know, if you like a hazy lower lash line, see how low that color drop, you can use a brush like I am now. If you want that shade to sit tighter near to the lash line, then I would pick up a pencil brush here just to keep that application more precise. Perhaps you might want to, how about this? So this is what it looks like just as is. Again, Maxi on the lid, really nice smoky hue. Yeah, mascara, some lashes, maybe a little bit of liner. What if we took Marlin and just placed that on the center? So it might not look as distinctly sage, although up close here, it still does. It has that light green hue. You can tap that on the center of the lid to create a little more contrast if you felt like Maxi by itself was too gray, and maybe tap this now on the center of the lower lash line so that could bracket. You could even whip it from that center point out right and left just to create a little more spread there. That's pretty. On the inner corner, we could do Flutter, we could do Palladian. We didn't try Holly. I think Holly is a little too dusty to place on the inner corner for highlighting purposes. So I'll take Flutter and place that on the inner corner. No, you can place Flutter on top of Maxi like we did with Marlin if you want more of that reflective effect, yeah? Because Flutter is the only shade in the palette that does have that twinkle about it when the light hits and it goes. I know, so technical in explaining. Eye number 1 done. I kind of want to place Oz all over the lid. I'm like dying to see how that would look. Going back into my worker again, much like how we started with Maxi, car alarm, excuse me. First taking that on the majority of the lid, and notice that I'm pulling down so as to keep the color here and then not travel too high just yet. You know what I mean? Being a little more precise with that. And then after we've established the general shape, we can go in with, Sage. Let's do it. Let's fully commit to this eye, okay? Sage is the more medium colored matte here. And just so you know, if you wanted to ground this, instead of going in with Sage, you very much could have gone in with Faye, that clay tone matte, and paired with Oz. It would have taken away a little bit of that green, but still amplify it because the undertone, I think, favors the shade of Oz beautifully well. But if you didn't want to fully commit to this, you can definitely go in with Faye instead of Sage. What I like to do once I've applied that matte, I then go in with my finger. And now we could be a little more liberal with this application since we initially took it on with a brush. And since we have the matte there, now the finger application has a platform to work on, where if the metallic traveled a little too high, it's okay because the matte is there to carry it through the crease. Now I think I want to do Palladian here on the inner corner. I think this will pair beautifully well with what we got going on the lid. So okay, pause, stay here. Wing liner, kohl liner. If you want, as I like to do, carry the color to the lower lash line. And it all, again, depends on your eye shape and the style of shadow. But I typically like to place shadow here on my lower lash line just so it could look a little more comprehensive. I went in with Oz, but we'll blend the edges with Sage here. I don't mind the color traveling down a little bit because it's so soft. I don't think it's going to look that crazy on me. Something you can do, although the majority of the eye look is sagey, you can go in with Flare, the rose colored metallic, and pop that here on the inner lower lash line. I think inviting this color creates really nice contrast. It definitely has like a vintage rose feel about it, yeah? With the softer shades, and pairing green with pink, it doesn't look so outrageously crazy on the lid. I think because, again, the hues here are so soft, they pair effortlessly together. This could stay as is. If you wanted a little more depth, you can go in with Evergreen. Let me see here. I'm going in with my Fusion, wrong color, Fusion Detail, and tapping Evergreen lightly here on the outer part of the lid. It's not going to have the same depth as, let's say, a color in a matte formula, because Natasha had explained because she likes certain colors in the cream to powder formula, as it does make them a little easier to blend out and not as intimidating to use, whereas that color maybe in a matte will have a little more depth, but I think nice because you have an opportunity to build it to where you need it to go. You know what I mean? I'm placing a little bit of Flutter here on the center of Oz. Look what that did. That brightened up the lid. You could keep Oz as is because that does have a lovely metallic finish, but what Flutter is going to do is add a little more dimension to the lid, have a little more reflectivity. Okay. We went a little taupey on this side, a little taupey-opey. All right, lashes, be right back. Here is round number 2. And while I understand the second look might resemble the first look from round 1, I think it's a little softer. Maybe, I don't know. I have to compare them when I look at the footage. The taupey side is fantastic. If you just want to simplify the approach to retro glam, grab one of the taupey shades, place it all over your lid. If you wanted to look a little more sagey, a little more taupey, then you could go in with Fae or Sage. Evergreen for a little more depth. So you got a lot of avenues to choose depending on how you want the look to appear. But what's fantastic is that the uniques play well with each other. See here, when I applied Marlin on top of Maxi, they didn't look heavy on the lids. There's just nice emolliency to Natasha's metallics that you're able to layer successfully, and it melts into the skin, and the finished effect is just shine, smooth on the lids. Really nice to just play and kind of experiment with what you decide to pair. And the coolness, I think, just right for every day, not too much. There's something about light pastels, dusty pastel greens that I think so lovely, that can be worn in spring, but in winter too. It has like that almost frostiness about it, but like not too pastel-y. Does that make any sense? I'm racking my head about what we should do for the final round, but we'll come up with something. Until then though, I'm gonna take these lashes off. Be right back. Final round, fam. What shall we do? Maybe you could definitely do, you know, something more graphic like this, right? But every time I do these videos, I try to create looks that will encourage people to use the palette. They're like, I'm not gonna do a cut crease, Alicia, so maybe not. But I will pull from this inspiration the outer part of the lid. I'll use Jazzy now to create that nice wing shape. So starting here on the outer part of the lash line, this is my reference number 3, and let's see what we can do here. And maybe just using Jazzy, prominently have this on the lash line, yeah? Create that wing type shape. And I could place a little bit here on the outer part of the lower lash line, which helps me better direct the angle of the wing, because, you know, sometimes I'm just way off on this. If you ever feel like you gotta reconstruct it, I always like to have a flat edge brush on standby with a little bit of concealer, or you could just wipe and start from scratch, which is what I'm gonna do, because I fail to nail how high I should whisk out the wing, because I don't want it to look curvy. I want it to have a flatter edge. All right, that's not too bad. I mean, it's not the best, but... And now with Fringe, I'm tapping that on the inner lid, because I now want to take Flutter on the lid. So placing Flutter solo on the lid is going to further showcase its reflectivity, right? That beautiful shine. So you can just have that as is sprinkled over the lid. If you don't wish to use it as like an amplifier, right? If you had another metallic shade on, and then you tapped on Flutter right on, so it can have a little more brightening. I'm being a stickler about this wing, forgive me. And why not? We can introduce another shade here. So we have, you know, the dark taupe, the sage green. Maybe we could do flare now on the lower lash line and just pull that right across. And it overlap a little bit with Jazzy here, because I pulled a little bit of that shade to the lower lash line. So just whipping that all the way across. That's fun. Not too bad. Wasn't a total disaster, but you know. Oh, wings, shadow wings, my nemesis. Okay. If you don't want any green, sage, whatever, I kind of want to pair Jazzy and Evergreen together. Like, how smoky can we go? So let me start off with Jazz here on the lid, and that's how the shade looks solo. It has a, you know, I think the most depth out of all the metallics in here. You can use it like we did in our first round to create a little more intensity on the outer lid, or if you want to completely commit to the smokiest, dial up the smokiest you can using Retro Glam, then all over the lid. Now with Evergreen, I'm using my detail brush here. I could actually use my, hold on, nope, changing my mind. Let's go in with the Fusion Blender. Still with the Evergreen shade, but I think it'll be interesting to see how the overall look will appear. Because when you pair Evergreen with Jazzy, you can see a little bit of that green. But I think the taupiness grounds it a bit more so that you don't feel like, oh, I don't want to have like a green eye, but it doesn't look like that. It has a green tint to it, yeah? And then perhaps you can go in with Lucy or Faye. I'm going to go in with Lucy because I want to keep the gradient a little more conservative here since I've already brought Evergreen pretty high up above my crease line. So Faye would have, I think, darkened it a little too much. So that's what I'm going to stick with. Picking up more Jazzy with my builder here to place more on the lid, but that's a nice gradient from that dark taupe into that forest green shade, which I would say like it's like a warm forest green, you know? Okay, Evergreen on the outer part of the lower lash line. You know what, in fact, I'm gonna take it a little more than that, maybe 3/4 across. And now Oscar, inner part of the lower lash line. Really nice brightening there. Yeah, you could do Evergreen all across, but I like a little bit of highlight here on the low lash inner corner. So many choices. We can do Fringe again, Palladium. You know, I really like Palladium. Although it's a little more powdery than the other metallics here because of the swatch, the way it applies is quite smooth. And the highlight effect I think it gives is lovely. So brushing that up through everything, yeah, to create that ooh. And we have here just like our wing liner side. We have our smoky side. Evergreen is beautiful paired with that taupe. I think if you wanted to hop into that shade but you weren't too sure about how it would look, it's so easy to blend with Jazzy. I mean, finished. You're done. All right. Last round is complete, but not complete without the lashes. I'll be back here in a minute. And here is our final round using Natasha Denona's Retro Glam palette. I am very happy with this palette. I think I enjoyed it more than I anticipated upon seeing it for the first time online. I don't think the photos do it justice. You have to get in here, see and feel and apply the shades for yourselves to fully appreciate this color story. Everything from the textures to the shades, the undertones. I think there are some beautiful looks that live here, and perhaps retro glam can be overlooked because of how it appears online. Again, just the softer greens, it being very cool tone, but the hues though, with the darker taupes and the sage greens, even with the sprinkle of rose in here, I think they all just work beautifully together. And in terms of the actual experience of applying these shadows, you couldn't ask for an easier one. The mattes are consistent with the Natasha Denona formula. The metallics are beautifully smooth. They have fluidity. You can blend them through your crease. You don't necessarily have to just apply them on the lid. The duochrome sparkly shades that exist in other palettes, not so much here. Again, I think Flutter is your most reflective shade and what I have on the lid, but I do think that simplifies things for the user where you don't have to worry about which duochrome should I put on now. You have Flutter here to create that dazzle effect on any of the metallics, whether it's the darker taupes, the rose metallic in flare, or the more green shades. It's lovely. I mean, it's so pretty. Is this my favorite? I don't know. Because before this drop, we have the Dream palette, which holds a very special place in my heart because I love the tones that exist in the Dream palette. But this is like, this is pretty cool, man. Paired with retro or paired with glam, I think if you combine these two, you can get really nice looks from both palettes, right? Even if you just paired the mini retro here with Retro Glam, right? Because the metallic in the mini retro has a little more like gray tint to it versus the metallics in Retro Glam lean more green. So if you were wanting more of that green, you now have it in Retro Glam. And I think it is now available on Sephora. So the sale, is the sale done? I don't even know. Maybe you could get it on sale. Maybe you just wait until next year. You know, that might be a crazy concept or not. I feel it's perfectly fine to save your money and just wait on certain things, not to rush out and buy it. The video will be here next year, hopefully, you know, if YouTube is still running. But quickly running through my favorite in the Natasha Denona mini portfolio: Retro, Bronze, Dream, and now Retro Glam is in heavy contention to find its way. Top five. I don't know about top 3. Ooh, that's higher tier. I gotta use it more. But that is it, fam. Hopefully this video helped. Again, perhaps you were thinking about picking up this palette. You weren't quite sure about how it looks, the shades and whatnot. Perhaps you could find a little inspiration from this video. Or if you are holding off from buying it, I just appreciate you for being here, friend. Thank you for spending some time with me. I'll see you down in the comments. And until then, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. And until then, I will see you on here again with another review tutorial, Natasha Denona Extravaganza, or monthly faves. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.